cast of characters here today. It's funny, I write down everybody's bio in one order and then everybody sits down higgledy-piggledy. So let me figure out where the heck I am.
We do that on purpose, just to test you.
Just to... I have failed. I'm going to put on my glasses so I look smarter.
Okay.
All right.
Ignotofsky with an I.
This is Rachel Ignotofsky. So I've got, everybody has their Twitter handle under their name. If you want to live tweet this, make us look good, please. Rachel Ignotofsky here is with her first book, Women in Science. Rachel is an illustrator and author based in beautiful Kansas City, Missouri. She grew up in Jersey on a healthy diet of cartoons and pudding. Lucky lady.
Yep.
And you were a senior designer at Hallmark Greetings?
Yeah, that was my job before I went solo.
But now she's solo, and she's drawing and she's writing, and you have, it says, a passion for taking dense information and making it fun and accessible, and Rachel hopes to use her work to spread her message about scientific literacy. And she's doing it with a really gorgeous book.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And we are on to Shannon Messenger. Hi. We actually are in order. Holy crap. If I go backwards, we're in order. Okay.
I feel like that says something that we're backwards, but somehow.
This is Alice in Wonderland.
It's like we're your bizarro panel. Like
that's even better. That means there's a good-looking version of me in another room. Shannon Messenger, author of Keeper of the Lost Cities #4, NEVERSEEN. Shannon has studied art and screenwriting, film production, but realized her passion was writing stories for children. She's the best-selling author of the middle grade series, Keeper of the Lost Cities, and the Skyfall series for young adults. Her books have been featured on multiple state reading lists, published in numerous countries, and translated into many different languages. She lives in Southern California with her husband and an embarrassing number of cats.
5.
Cece Bell, continuing down the line, is the award-winning author of DEAFO. Cece Bell lives in an old church in Virginia and works in a newish barn right next door. She grew up in Salem, Virginia, and drank a lot of limeades at the Brooks Bird Pharmacy downtown. She has worked as a freelance illustrator for all kinds of nutty projects, but is now a full-time author and illustrator. Cece enjoys moments of hilarity with Tom, along with 3 lady dogs and 2 youngsters.
The dogs are dead. That's an outdated.
Oh, no.
One boy dog now.
And,
I feel like we need a moment of silence for the dogs.
That is sad. But she was a lady, and that's what matters. Tania del Rio is the author of Warren the 13th and the All-Seeing Eye. She's an author and a comic artist. Her manga entry, or manga if you're me, Love Sketch, was selected to appear in Tokyo Pop's Rising Stars of Manga Anthology Volume 2. She's been a writer and artist for Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Sonic the Hedgehog, Josie and the Pussycats, Marvel, Dark Horse, and wrote Diary of a Girl Next Door, Betty, the Riverdale Diaries. CD, that's like Red Shoe Diaries, but for us. Which is new, her new middle grade novel, that's your new middle grade novel. But she's got also a YA paranormal that's looking for a home. Pay attention, agents, editors, we've got something here. Tahereh Mafi, author of Furthermore, is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of the Shatter Me series. She can usually be found over-caffeinated and stuck in a book. Shatter Me is her first series, with television rights optioned by ABC Signature Studios. Congratulations. And Furthermore, her newest project will be out on August 30th. Awesome. And last but not least, Ned Rust is the author of Patrick Griffin's Last Breakfast on Earth. Ned is a former boatyard worker, assistant English teacher, assistant maritime investigator, rock critic, rock photographer, organic chemist, biochemist, pollster, co-author with James Patterson of #1 bestsellers, and he generally at least aspires to be an upstanding suburban New York husband and dad. Wow. That's our panel, folks. So, middle grade novels. Does anybody know what middle grade is?
I do.
Shannon, what is middle grade?
Well, it depends on how some people define it, but very, very, very broadly, it is books that are for kids ages 8 to 12 usually. and usually means that they go into elementary school libraries. But I really personally see it as mostly a marketing category, and not necessarily that your characters have to be a certain age or the books have to be a certain number of pages. It just means that they're marketing the books to middle grade age children.
So they're targeted to a certain age group.
Yeah.
So what we're here to talk about today is capturing the imagination of these kids aged 8 to 12. Now, I am very opinionated, and I think that there's a real lack of curiosity in the world right now. Apparently, most people never click past the first page of a Google search, because if it's not on page 1, then they just don't really care. But we all know that kids are incredibly curious, right? Kids are little scientists, they're little investigators, and they're always asking questions. So what is great about what we have here are books about extraordinary worlds. Sometimes it's ordinary people in extraordinary worlds and extraordinary circumstances. And I know that the books we're talking about here have everything from transplanetary interdimensional travel, cephalopods, witches, bunnies with superpowers, and real women, real inventors and real scientists who explore the world. So I'm going to ask each of you to describe your book, if you could, in a line or two, and then I want to talk about imagination.
Sounds good.
So my book is about 50 women from ancient times to modern day. So we go all the way from ancient Rome with Hypatia to 2014 with Miriam Mizrakhani, who have incredibly impacted our world with their discoveries, their explorations, and their work in science. And I just hope that these women all become household names and that these kids get really inspired by their stories.
That is so cool. So I call my series really on the short tagline pitch, Lord of the Rings meets X-Men. And it's set in a world where sort of all the cities like Shangri-La and Atlantis and things that you might have heard of do exist, but they're very different in my imagination than how you might have heard the myths and legends. And we're sort of following this 12-year-old girl who's just responsible for saving the world. That's not asking a lot of a kid, I don't think.
I mean, she's already 12.
Right, I mean, I did that when I was 12, totally.
My book, DEAFO, is an autobiographical graphic novel, and it basically chronicles my childhood from the day in 1975 when I got really sick and lost about 90% of my hearing to about the 5th grade. And a lot of it is about, this was in the 1970s, so a lot of it was about me having to wear a really big, awkward hearing aid that made me look and feel very different from everybody else in my school. But I discovered very soon after I got the hearing aid that the hearing aid worked together with a microphone that the teacher wore. And so I discovered very early on that not only was I hearing my teacher better in the classroom, but I could hear her wherever she was in the entire school building. So superpowers, and so it's sort of a superhero book of me trying to navigate my deafness and also friendships in school and things like that. So it's mostly funny and hopefully educational.
My book is about a 12-year-old Victorian bellhop who lives in his family's ancient hotel, and it's usually deserted, but when word gets out of a mysterious treasure buried within called the All-Seeing Eye, all kinds of crazy guests show up, like witches and treasure hunters and pirates, and Warren has to solve a series of clues left by his ancestors to find the treasure and save his hotel from ruin.
That sounds amazing. My book, Furthermore, is a sort of modern fairy tale about a colorless girl living in an extremely colorful world. And it's inspired almost entirely by my love of, by my favorite books ever, the books that I loved growing up. And it's sort of an homage to, or a love letter, I would say, to like The Secret Garden and Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz and The Chronicles of Narnia and the sort of wonder and whimsy of entering this new fantastical world and discovering the magic there and the magic you have within.
And mine is called Patrick Griffin's Last Breakfast on Earth. And speaking of Narnia, I think I got a comp from somebody that said it was like Chronicles of Narnia meets Home Alone. It involves a pretty average kid who ends up in an alternate world. And I was just thinking of your comment about Google and curiosity out there. There's a sort of a world that is sort of an extrapolation of where we might be heading in this world, where you only get that first page of search results, and there's sort of a what seems like a wonderful utopia, but it's a very controlling, overprotective government that's running the place. So it's actually supposed to be humorous, but there's some dark stuff going on there.
There's always some dark stuff going on. Hey, man, that's what being a middle grader is all about, the dark stuff. So imagination. I was thinking, like, well, how am I going to approach this panel? So I looked up imagination in the dictionary. Curiosity, look things up. So according to Merriam-Webster, imagination is the ability to imagine things that are not real, the ability to form a picture in your mind of something that you have not seen or experienced, which writers do all the time, the ability to think of new things, and imagination is also defined as something that only exists or happens in your mind. So it's kind of like Comic-Con. I went on further to read some studies in Parenting Magazine. They cited some psychological studies that said a child with a good imagination is happier and more alert, better able to cope with life's twists and turns, and more likely to grow into a well-adjusted, secure adult. So we're doing the good people's work up here. So with that in mind, the first key, it's sort of like that door to Narnia. It's the wardrobe, right? It's the what's the thing that exists in the world of a middle grader's mind that you have to be able to tap into. So you can take this in any order you want, but I would like to know, how do you get into the mindset of the age group that you're writing for? And was it a conscious decision to write for that age group, or did you say, I've got a great idea for a book, and wrote it, and then somebody said, oh, a middle grade?
Well, for me, it helps that I'm incredibly immature. I'm pretty sure I'm actually still 12 years old, and I really don't enjoy having to be an adult. So it was just very, very natural to me, and I actually did intentionally set out to write middle grade. For me, when I was thinking about writing a book, I thought about my love of reading, and for me, when I was in middle grade, that was when reading was the most special. I like to read now. I read a lot. When I find a book I love, I'm like, that was great, but it still goes on the shelf and I never have time to read it again because being an adult isn't very fun and you don't have as much free time. But when I was a kid, if I read something I loved, I'd read it over and over again because I just wanted to live in that world with those characters as much as I could. And so I thought if I was going to try to channel some passion into a story, I should try to write for that version of myself that had just had such a special passion for reading. I was that kid that was always getting in trouble for sneaking out of bed past bedtime and crawling over to my nightlight, and then my dad would throw open the door and be like, aha, and I'd be busted. And so that was sort of my goal, was to write a book for 12-year-old Shannon and just sort of hope that there was other 12-year-old Shannons out there, even though that also sort of sounds like the beginning of a dystopian novel. The whole world of 12-year-old Shannons, oh no!
It's a little bit of the opposite for me. When I was a kid, I struggled with reading a lot. I mean, I was tested for dyslexia multiple times, and for me, it was cartoons. It was all about the cartoons and the comic books. And do you guys remember Emilio's Notebook? That was my obsession when I was a kid, and I would read that over and over and over again because of all the little cartoons that were in it. That was kind of like the candy that came with the vegetables. So for me, I'm talking about stuff that I just think is really important for young girls and boys to grow up with, which is really strong, real female role models. And talking about information that can be incredibly dense. We're talking like astrophysicists and genetics and high math. And I just really wanted to take that information and make it really accessible and fun and exciting to read, and make that book that that kid would read over and over again, and also not be fearful of really high-level information. To be like, oh, like, this information's really fun to learn about. I want to go past the second page on Google and learn even more about it. And I really think that cartoons are a really effective tool for that, because for me, that's how I got past that hump and that kind of fearfulness as a kid. So, yeah, I think adults have that too. So, adults and kids.
Cece, you were going to say something?
I think I was tapping into the feeling of my own personal childhood and feeling different. And I was sort of fortunate in that I was able to tap into, I mean, I'm still deaf, I'm still a lip reader, and I still have a lot of the awkward communication, interactions, and problems every single day that I was writing about in the book. And so it was really easy to just take the feelings that I have as an adult and remember what they felt like as a kid, in which they were much, much bigger and amplified. And because the book is in graphic novel format, moments that might not be as big a deal to me now as an adult, like communication problems, in the book they can be drawn very big. You know, here's a huge panel that shows the total communication breakdown. I think that's what I was trying to tap into, being as honest with my readers as I could, because I think kids really respond to honest writing. You know, I know what this feels like, and when they see themselves in a book, or they see an emotion that they've experienced in a book, I think they get really excited, and you really capture them that way.
Yeah, for me, it was really easy to tap into like the 8 to 12 age range. For me, that was like literally the most magical time of my life, because the blurry, the lines between reality and my imagination were so blurry. Like, I really believed in the impossible. I believed that my toys could come alive at night. I believed I could actually fly if I tried hard enough. All these things that were really, if you're an adult, you would think you're delusional, but like as a child, you're not jaded yet, and all that possibility still exists. So for me to write to that child is so much easier than any other age group. So I kind of feel like it's very natural.
I feel so awful saying this, but I had no idea I was writing a middle grade novel.
Yay, I was hoping for a little, like, the rest of us are trapped in our middle grade years, so congratulations.
I write YA novels generally. I mean, that's sort of, as they say, I cut my teeth on YA novels, and it's been my jam for the last 5 years. But I wrote this book thinking I was writing another YA novel, and my main character was 16, and it was all going swimmingly until my editor pointed out to me that I was in fact writing a middle grade novel. And I was really upset. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to write middle grade novels. I have no interest in writing middle grade novels. It's not what I signed up for. And I was like, I really like my friends, like, it's gonna be fine. And she was like, that's a lifestyle problem. I clearly wrote a middle grade novel. So, yeah, I don't really know how to answer this question, because...
But somehow you managed to do it. One of the things that you and Ned actually both do, and to an extent some of the other writers, you create, they're both these sort of incredible extrapolations of our world. You create language. Twincesses is a word that appears in your book that I just love that word. Twincesses. It's the princesses and the twincesses. And Ned, you created a lot of slang for your parallel world.
Yeah.
So can you guys talk a little bit about that, about the language play that you created? Because that is something that's very appealing to that age group.
Yeah, I mean, and back to the middle grade thing a little bit, I happen to have a day job in publishing, so I'm very aware of the categories here.
So you knew when you were entering middle grade territory.
But it was funny because I wrote it and I didn't really think about it that much. I mean, I probably the biggest influence was I had a son who's 16 now, but at the time I was doing most of the writing on book one was right there, so it was like and there's just sort of this awareness about, I think that particular age group, 8 to 12, that's where I really fell in love with reading, and I think where a lot of kids do, where like the magic of books really comes home to you at that point, because you're off on your own and you can be self-propelled at it. You're no longer being read to, but you're not, old and cynical. Like you're
It's your
believing
first
in all
time
this.
you forge out on your own.
But so certainly, like because my poor son got focus grouped on this thing so many times, I just kept reading and rereading and rereading it to him, and just the slang and the wordplay is just I think at that age you enjoy that a lot. You can really get surprised that way, and in the case of my book, the alternate world, the sort of efficiency state has come up, and they've done things like English has like annoying spellings in it. A lot of words, if you look at them, and you would not know that that it sounds out the way it does.
Right, they sound different. from the way they
enough
sound.
and words like that. So everything's been gone over, and they've made a phonetic alphabet for everything. So there's a lot of that going on when you're in this alternate world, and actually kind of makes things a little more confusing. But it's also, I think the kids get into that kind of decoding experience. So.
Tanya, you also have decoding in your book, right? You have mirror writing.
Yeah, there's some backwards writing in the book, as well as some little visual cues and clues that are kind of scattered throughout. And I remember, it frustrates me because there was a book when I read as a child, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called, but it had some elements of that, and it always stuck with me.
What is it? Let's crowdsource it.
It was about a hamburger. I lived in England for a few years, so it might not even be available in the States. That's
So
the
it's
thing.
a British book about
a hamburger, about a kid trying to find the recipe for the perfect hamburger.
All right,
And
we're gonna get back to you on that.
All right.
Write down her Twitter handle and tweet her the answer.
At Tania del Rio, let me know. But yeah, so that one had some elements of little hidden clues hidden throughout where you could solve the mystery ahead of the character even. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and that always kind of stuck with me.
Very cool. I'm going to circle onto, you can't circle onto something, but I'm not circling back because this is new. Well, Cece, your book, now it's autobiographical, but I was talking to my brother's kids the other day, and I said, oh, I'm going to meet Cece Bell, and my nephew said, is that the bunny book? That's the bunny book. And I'm wondering, first of all, there's more than one rabbit on this table. There is a jackalope in Ned's book, and then you have the bunny. And I wondered, for anybody who doesn't know what a jackalope is, go to Wyoming. They live there. They are giant jackrabbits with antlers. Jackrabbit, antelope, jackalope. My question is anthropomorphism. You see it a lot in children's books. I had a librarian refer to them as people in animal suits.
Right.
Because they do everything that humans do, but they look like animals.
Right.
And I'm curious as to why did you choose to go the bunny route instead of a human? And if any of you, Rachel, you've got all kinds of animals dressed up as scientists.
Oh,
no, you don't. No, you don't. But I wonder about that choice. We've got an octopus-like creature in Tanya's book. There are these. So can we talk about anthropomorphism? Like, what drew you to it?
Okay. For me, I specifically chose rabbits. I was trying to sort of make a visual metaphor about hearing. The book is all about hearing and deafness, not being able to hear. And so rabbits, as we all know, have giant ears. And I was trying to sort of make a connection of, I felt like the one rabbit in a school of rabbits who had the giant ears like everybody else, but my giant ears did not work. And that was part of it. Another part was, in real life, as a person, the cords that were connected to the box of the hearing aid went up to the sides of my head. But in the book, they're drawn so that they go all the way over my head into my rabbit ears, which was much closer to how I felt. I felt very conspicuous, with very visible. And I also wanted to use the rabbits to sort of make this world where like anybody reading the book could identify with the rabbit. You know, I wasn't a rabbit of any particular race, for example. It's just we were all rabbits, and I think that also kind of helps connect the readers to the character. They
Make it more universal.
They're more likely to be me and to be the other rabbits in the book because you know nobody is a rabbit. but it was a thing that I questioned at first because I felt like maybe I was doing too many things at once. I had the rabbits, I had the superhero stuff, but in the end, I think it worked.
Somehow it sounds like it really did work. We all know it really worked. Ned, why the jackalope?
It just seemed fun. I just, it just, you know, to have a jackalope talking, and you know, that's a wonderful thing about books is you get to identify with characters you wouldn't normally get to identify with, and in a way that you can't even in a video game or a movie. Get to walk a mile in a jackalope's shoes, you know.
Hop a mile. You hop a mile in a jackalope's shoes.
You guys are actually very lucky. I was talking with my marketing team about getting wearing a jackalope costume today, but
You know, of all the places you could get away with it,
I know
this
that's
was it.
exactly what we were
This
thinking.
is it. You would have been embraced. And Tanya, you have a cephalopod.
Yeah.
In your story, but you chose to make him silent.
Yes.
Or her, I'm not sure.
It's an it. It's officially
It's a gender fluid
Yes.
creature. And I wonder, why that choice?
I find that with a lot of, it's hard to say, like I guess I always see anthropomorphized characters as sort of ciphers.
Okay.
Where you can almost input whatever you want into them. And I think I wanted to make this one almost as blank as possible. Mm-hmm. It's Warren's closest friend, but it's also a mystery, which kind of is a lot about Warren's identity. Like he doesn't even know who he is in a lot of ways. And I feel like it's almost a reflection of him, almost like if he were to be anthropomorphized, like he would be that creature.
Right.
And the fact that it's his friend, but there's no judgment. It's a very, almost like a pet in a way. Like it loves you unconditionally, but it almost is I don't know, all I can think of is a cipher. It's a symbol, almost.
So I have a question for what I'm going to call the art books up here. Because Rachel, obviously, your book is art-based, and Tanya, yours is too. And Cece. But also, Tahereh, your book, like most of these novels, they get a gorgeous cover, and if you're lucky, some spot illustrations. If you guys get a chance to come up and look at these books or come to our signing, we're signing in Autograph Alley after this, and take a look at these books, they're absolutely gorgeous. But Tahereh, your book is a work of art on the inside because it is a land of color. And a land of visual, just sort of visual majesty. And I wonder, was there ever a thought that you might make it more of an illustrated book?
No one has ever asked me that question before.
No. You heard it here first.
No. Never occurred to me.
Is that because you still think you're writing a young adult novel?
Yeah. Not anymore. There's a companion novel to this book that I've also written, and so when I wrote that one, I knew that was middle grade, and so my brain has changed now, and I understand middle grade a lot more, and it's a skin I feel comfortable wearing, but no, it had never occurred to me to illustrate this. That's a very good question.
You've got a month. I suggest that you get somebody on it, at least some art for the website.
I did hear somebody say that we should include like what do they call it, like a coloring page?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. It'd be gorgeous to do a coloring book companion. Get on it. So then for the artist writers here, Rachel and Cece and Tanya. Tanya, you're an artist, but this book was done by a different artist.
Yeah, it was a collaboration with a longtime friend of mine who, he has a very distinctive style, very Victorian engraving style, which is something, my style is a little different, so I don't think it would have worked for this book, so we collaborated. I wrote it and he drew it. So.
Can we talk a little bit, all of you artisty people, can we talk a little bit about the experience of writing? Now, this is your first book.
Yeah, this is the first thing I ever really wrote.
Okay, and Cece, is El DEAFO your first book?
No, I have lots of picture books in my past.
Yes,
over the
yes.
years. Yeah.
So, For you, I'll ask what your experience was like doing this book, having to do the art and the text together. And Cece, I wonder for you, did you ever consider not doing it as a graphic novel or doing it as a picture book instead?
Not at all. It was always supposed to be this way.
Always?
Yeah, always, because of the speech balloons.
Okay.
I had to have those speech balloons.
Right, because they're
and
used
I
very,
used them a lot.
yeah, very well to depict the hearing and the not. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Well,
Rachel?
yeah, for me, what I really do outside of making this book is I do a lot of scientific illustration, and for me the research always comes first, and that's just my design background showing through, where it's dependent on the information, form over function, function over form. So for me, it was just,
I'm going to just open the books and let you see some of these pages.
yeah, for me, it was all about organizing the information in a way where it just invites you inside, and you actually can know what you're doing just at a glance. You absorb all the information. So it was always just this sort of data-driven book. And then when I was learning about these women's stories, it was just this overwhelming feeling of just, wow, you know, like just, like oh, I feel so indebted to these women for everything they had to overcome and everything that they discovered, and I just really wanted to highlight their skills and who they were and share their stories. And for me, it was really important that I wrote it because I wanted to be able to really say things the way I wanted to say it. So not only do you get to learn about science in this book, you get to learn about, you know, suffrage and the civil rights movement and World War II and the space race, and how these individual women impacted the course of history as well, because I thought that was really important. And yeah, so I guess for me, writing, it was all just about being able to control what I was going to do, because you don't get that as an illustrator a lot.
Right, generally, for those of you who don't know, if you are not the writer-illustrator, quite often the artist is assigned to you by the publisher, quite often. And then it's sort of like working in a dark room trying to develop film. Like, you have no idea what's going to come out. And then one day you get an email going, don't you love it? And hopefully the answer is yes. So you guys have all been really lucky up here. You make me think, obviously this book had a lot of research in it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if what came first, the research and then the idea to do the book? Like, did you, I know all this stuff about these women, I want to do a book about it, or?
Yeah, it kind of went like that. I started doing these poster series about these women in science. You know, I have a lot of friends in education, and we were talking a lot about the gender gap and how women in STEM are treated and how women are portrayed in the media. And I just kept saying over and over and over again, you know, we aren't taught about these women in history class, we're not taught about them in science class. And then you start talking enough about something that if you don't start doing it, you're like
So
a
you
really
have your
big schmuck.
posters you were selling on
So
on
yeah, I
Etsy.
had posters that I was selling on Etsy, and I always had this idea in the back of my head that I wanted them to become a book. And as I was doing the research for just the poster series, which just really highlighted these women's accomplishments, I just literally just overwhelmed by the amount of women who have contributed just as much as like Einstein and Tesla have, but nobody knows who they are. So I just really wanted to create a book that is so pretty, you can't help but pick it up and learn about them. So, because it really does, when something looks cool and looks like beautiful, like
You'll stare at it longer, and
stare
oh
at
my
it
gosh, you
longer.
might learn something.
Yeah, and then people who are like, oh, like, I love science, all of a sudden they're like picking it up and thumbing through it, and they're just like learning, they're just learning. Or just people who are like, oh, this just looks really, really cool. All of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, you know, Cecilia Payne discovered the sun. You know, it's really, it's like, things like that like really end up happening, and you just get to interact with a whole new audience who just all of a sudden has this new excitement for learning that they didn't have before.
So it's like you're capturing the imagination of middle grade readers.
I think
Look
I
what we did
am.
there. Look at
So here's a question. So you did a bunch of research leading up to this book. Shannon, on your blog, you talk about all the research that you did for your series.
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's fiction. So, I mean, obviously, I am not, you know, trying to...
World building,
Right.
still a lot of world building. We've got a lot of worlds here.
Yeah.
How many of you, your world is is based on our world in some way, or an extrapolation of things that exist in our world? Raise your hand.
Yeah. I mean,
You should all raise your hand.
and that was
Let's talk about the research.
Yeah, well, and for me, like, because I intentionally, the series is about elves. And so I knew that there was, and that was why I was drawn to them, because there's such unique lore about elves, because it's so diverse. Like, it's everything from, like, the little Keebler elves that are in, you know, the hollow tree making cookies, to Santa's helpers, to Legolas. And I was, of course, much more drawn.
The Keebler ones aren't real.
Yeah.
The rest are.
I was drawn toward Legolas. And so...
As is every right-thinking straight woman.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So I was trying to figure out both sort of why we see elves so many different ways, and try to figure out how to sort of come up with reasons for why that is and incorporate that in, but then also try to incorporate as much of that lore into my world as possible, but without sort of tying my hands with it. So, like, I didn't want my character to have pointy ears, but it was very hard to ignore the fact that whenever you look up anything about elves, you see them with pointy ears. And so somewhere down the Wikipedia rabbit hole, this is where I do most of my research since it's fiction, so it's okay that I'm using Wikipedia. I found some random little informative detail that said that one of the only parts of the human body that continues to grow instead of shrink as we age is our ears. And I started looking at old people and realizing that, right, this is a fact that's on Wikipedia. And so I thought, what if it was the same way with my elves? What if, as they age, the points of their ears, because I also gave my creatures an indefinite lifespan, kind of like Tolkien's elves.
So it's like frequent flying and you earn points.
Right, yeah, so you get yes, pun points for the win. Yeah, so I gave them that as they get older and older and older, you can tell the ancient elves because they have the pointy ears. So that's kind of what I do. I sort of read random little tidbits of either myths that are out there or actual details, and then figure out how I can throw that into my fiction and sort of, I call it Shannon science. It's sort of all smashed together. There's enough fact that it's like, yeah, that sort of makes sense, but at the same time, it's, you know, definitely fiction, not, you know, scientific
you get
fact.
to the point where people are like, okay, they're not making cookies.
Right, yeah.
We get it.
Any other research stories or things that you've discovered, like pointy ears?
Are you addressing to me or to other people?
Hey, everybody.
Okay.
Everybody.
I feel like I've been talking
Everybody
for a
had
while.
to do a
Everybody
certain
else talk.
amount of research.
What was the question?
I did a little bit of research. Well, I've actually just always been a fan of the Victorian era in general, and
So you
before
knew
this
it.
book, yeah, so I already kind of knew it. And like even before this, I wrote a series of short things I called Dollar Dreadfuls, which were sort of based off Penny Dreadfuls, which were like escapist short fiction with like crazy things. So one of them was like about a scientist who builds a pneumatic bride because he can't, you know. So it was just like these little things I built, kind of steampunky. So for years, I've always just been really into that time period. So I've already done research over the years, but for this book in particular, I didn't necessarily do a lot of new research, but it was just stuff I'd kind of collected about the era to infiltrate.
That's the pneumatic bride. I'm stuck. I want to know. Let's see. We're getting close. I think we've got 5 minutes, and then we're gonna do questions.
So start thinking of questions.
So start thinking of questions, because you'll have time for questions. But I do want to know a couple of things. Aside from school visits, and so I'll ask quickly, how many of you do school visits? Do you come out and speak to students about your work? If you do a school visit, raise your hand.
I'd be willing to.
We're going to convince you to do school visits if you don't. It's awesome, because that is another great way of capturing a kid's imagination. When they discover, I don't know about you guys, because I'm probably older than everybody on this panel combined, but I wear it well. But when I was a kid, I did not know that authors existed. I just knew the books existed. And you don't really stop. They're like Smurfs. They pop out of nowhere, and you don't really think about where they come from. And but today, there's so much more interaction through social media that you get to know the people that created the work. And there's something very wonderful about going into a school and having the kids meet you, and suddenly even the reluctant readers are on fire to read what you've written and to try their hands at it. So school visits are another great way of capturing young imaginations. So I'm wondering if any of you have suggestions to help parents teachers and other gatekeepers tend to the imaginations of their kids. Some of you have children of your own. What do you do to keep them thinking and dreaming outside the box?
Read books.
Read books.
Exactly. Yeah, reading them.
You learned it here first, folks.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, I mean, what's so cool about when you look down the line of this book, like, none of our books are remotely similar to each other.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool, especially in middle grade, because they really are trying so hard to make sure that there is a book for every kid, because we just want them to find their love of reading. So if you have a kid that thinks they don't love to read, it probably just means they haven't found that book yet.
That's
right.
And so keep giving them different books, keep encouraging them to try different stories, because sooner or later they will find that one that they're just like, this is the best thing ever, and suddenly they love to read. And that is the best part of my job, when I get those emails from parents or teachers telling me that something I wrote did that for somebody. It's like, suddenly all the sleepless nights and deadlines are totally worth it, because one kid is now reading because of something I did, and it's just the best compliment anyone can give you.
Also, just let your kid learn the way that they like to learn. Like, all of our brains are different, and learning should be this real fun process, and let your kid experiment with that, whether it's, watching educational documentaries or playing educational games or just talking about what they're interested with their friends. There's many different ways to learn, and also get them involved with books, obviously. But one thing I just really want to say, especially for middle school, this is when a kid is developing their identity. This is when they're all of a sudden they're like, this is the thing I'm into, and I'm so excited about it, and maybe I want to go to college for it. So if your kid is really good at something, or really interested in a certain topic, and maybe it's something that maybe you're not familiar with, let them grow that and nurture that, because it's really important.
I want to say something about reluctant readers. I was an avid reader as a kid, and my brother was not. And I found out that when he opened a book, he saw a lot of words. And he said, you have to look at each of them. When I opened a book, I saw a doorway to another world. And so I like to take kids into a library and say, every spine you see is a doorway to another world. Go find the one you want. And that, I wish I had known that to tell my brother when we were kids.
Yeah, that's really smart. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, feel free to use that. Feel free to use that. So I think I'm going to do a rapid fire. Everybody, if you can tell me what's next for you, what your next book is, and then we'll open for questions. Next book?
Next book, Women in Sports.
Women in Sports, awesome.
Yeah, strong women.
I have the 5th book in this series called Lodestar, coming out November 1st.
Awesome.
I'm illustrating 3 books by my husband, an early early chapter book called Inspector Flytrap.
Awesome.
The sequel to Warren the 13th will be out early next year, and I'm also working on some other unnamed middle grade.
Furthermore will be out at the end of August 30th to be exact, and the companion novel should be out next year. Hope no one shoots me for saying that. But I'm not sure.
And this should be out in like a week and a half or something, and then I think I finished the second book, although Connie will tell me if that's accurate. And that'll be about a year from that.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, questions? Aquaman.
Or Jeffrey.
Okay.
What is the one thing, and you could do rapid fire again answer, what's the one thing writing for middle school kids that you were like totally surprised by, like, oh my God, I never thought about that?
Well, for me, I was writing for adults too. I was like writing for adults and like just making sure that it also could be for middle schoolers. So for me, it was just not to underestimate how much they can learn. Like just be like, you know what, nothing's too difficult for someone in 6th grade to tackle or younger.
For me, my series has a female main character, and so when I wrote it, I knew that I was writing it mostly for females, but I hoped that boys would pick it up, but I had this sort of, like, I don't know if they will. I don't know if boys will read about a girl. I really, really hoped that they would, but I had my doubts. And it's been amazing to see how many boys are willing to read about a girl and love the book, despite the fact that it has a girl main character. I'd say my readership is probably 60-40, and it's been awesome.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. So his question was, what has surprised you in writing for middle grade readers? Has anything surprised you?
Oh, surprised me. I'm not really sure. I guess I'm sort of surprised by how many hearing kids have come up to me and said, you know, I'm different too, and I know exactly how you felt, because it's true. I think everybody feels different. So it's been really neat to just to find out that everybody feels that way, and it is kind of surprising to find that out sometimes.
I think for me, it's just knowing that, or learning that even though it's marketed towards a younger audience, it's okay to be a little dark. Like, I think a lot of people think they need to insulate their kids against darkness, and sometimes it's real life things like death or disease, but sometimes it's also fantastical darkness. And I remember a lot of my favorite books growing up had really dark elements, so I kind of wanted to kind of play with that as well.
I've had a lot of fun, like just sort of playing in very, very different sort of crazy worlds. I feel like you can do so much more with middle grade than you can in any other age group, because kids are willing to go on really crazy adventures with you. And I don't know, I feel like the older we get, the more cynical we get, so.
Yeah, I got I mean, this book isn't out yet, so I'll probably know a lot more about this next year, but I think I have sort of similar experience that with the few kids who have read it, that they really like exploring just, you know, off the wall stuff.
Fantastic,
Thanks.
you. I read all of Nancy Drew when I was a kid, so.
Awesome. Yeah, the one thing I learned that's very surprising is that the funniest word to middle graders is still underpants. Next.
Hi, my question is, what was your favorite book when you were growing up? Like as a kid when you were like a middle
All right,
grade
favorite
reader?
book growing up.
That's a good question. This is when I suddenly forget all books that ever exist. I do remember, I loved the Ramona books. Ramona just spoke to me because I grew up kind of really broke around a bunch of friends who weren't broke. And Ramona, I can't remember which one it was, but there were a couple different ones where she was like, her family was struggling financially, and so it was just like, there are other kids like me, and I really saw myself in Ramona, so any of the Ramona books.
I actually read this series called World's Greatest Artists, which were also biography books. I think it's by Michael Vasquez. I think that's his last name. And I loved it because I would go into my art class in like 5th grade and be like, Picasso's Blue Period. Like for real. And I'd be like, futurism. So like there's something about that.
Would you then have a cigarette and espresso and snap your fingers?
I would just be like, yeah, Goya, you know, so dark and edgy. Yeah, I'd be like talking about all these like Renaissance painters, like they were my best friends. So yeah, that was it.
Mine were also the Beverly Cleary books. Especially, I wasn't Ramona, I was Beezus.
Beezus
She
was
really
also
resonated with me a lot, so those were mine, definitely.
For me, it was anything by Roald Dahl, especially the BFG and the Witches, which if you read this, you'll see some echoes of the Witches for sure.
That's cool.
For me, it's kind of a toss-up between The Prince and the Pauper, which I read like 1,000 times, and Harry Potter. I discovered Harry Potter when I was 11, and Harry was 11, and so I sort of grew up on those books, and they changed my life.
Yeah, I was all over the place, but I remember Ursula Le Guin had a book called The Wizard of Earthsea that I loved as a kid, and then I got into like a weird Dungeons and Dragons phase, and I liked an author called Michael Moorcock a lot. He did like a book called The Weird of the White Wolf, I remember. But
Moorcock,
yeah.
Elric, perfect. Not appropriate for middle grade, but perfect.
but I read it in middle
That's
school.
the book
I know
you
my,
don't show
my
your parents
were a
you're
little,
reading, but you read
permissive.
it anyway.
And I just want to say, Shannon, I would also get out of bed and read books a lot too when I'm not supposed to. So I'm a mini.
That's a good bad habit.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, I have a question regarding how you handle the language with middle grade. So do you write in a more elevated language and then go back and dial back, or does the the language needed to market towards middle grade audiences come naturally to you? How do you navigate that process?
I never had to change a vocabulary word ever because they were. I think that kids are way smarter than we realize. My editor worked with me in the beginning when I was still sort of getting the handle on it on kid worldview. So it would be things like if I would have a character that was looking at someone wearing a three-piece brown suit, would I describe it as an espresso-colored three-piece suit, or would I just call it a chocolate brown suit, or maybe just a brown suit? Like, which is more authentic to the kid? It wasn't that they wouldn't understand espresso or whatever, but just is that where the kid brain would go? So I did have to sort of learn to tweak that, but I've never gotten a note that like, I don't think kids will understand this vocabulary word. You need to simplify it. I don't know if anyone else has had anything different, but I never have.
Yeah, I don't underestimate kids at all, and I have some stuff in this book that would be hard for most adults, but that's what glossaries are for, and I got an illustrated glossary at that. So I think, you know, it's always great to just learn new things, and words are part of that.
Yeah, I would agree. Like with this book, I didn't. Since it's set in the Victorian era, there's a lot of antiquated words, and there's some like unusual words that I use. But my editor was really cool, and that he just write it like how it would be written. And you know, kids are really smart, and if they don't know a word, like they know how to look it up. So.
And you can also mess with them and make up words. Just put them in there.
What's the hardest level of expletive you're allowed to use in middle grade?
Are you trying to get us in trouble?
The biggest swear word, ladies and gentlemen, that you can use in middle grade. What do you think?
Jeez, I mean...
Geez, you can say geez.
Oh, gosh!
You can say heck. You can say dang. You can say darn. What else?
Yeah, I've been lucky because my characters aren't human, so it wouldn't make sense that they would be using human
You
swear
can make up a
words.
Yeah, or
Yeah, or I tend to just say he swore and leave it at that.
I remember reading a book to my son in which and I kind of groaned, but they said AG double hockey sticks instead of the word.
Worst swear word that you can use in middle grade.
Oh, swear word. Oh, I have a swear word in mind.
Yay! What is it? What's the word?
And it was a battle to get it in there. So, no, the word that I use is AG double hockey stick. And so, but it was important because that was a word that I heard a teacher say, and it sort of shows that I was hearing things that I should not have been hearing. So luckily it stayed in there. So, but what a victory it was. Thank you for repeating the question.
Tanya?
Yeah, not sure. I don't know if any of the words, like, I mean, because it's Victorian, I didn't use any contemporary bad words. I might have used bloody in one of them, but I can't remember.
I think it depends on what kind of book you want to write. Like, are you writing like a sort of tough, gritty book for children who grow up hearing a lot of really rough language? In that case, you know, follow your heart. But if you're, you know, I think it just depends. Like, it can be an issue book or it can be like an adventure book. Like, it just, you know, I made up some bad words in my book and my editor made me take them out.
Can you give us one of your made-up bad words?
Like, so they live in this town called Farrenwood. And so the main character, Alice, she gets really upset one day and she calls this other kid a Farren bleeding fecal sniffer.
May we use that?
I had to take that out. There is a word, she does call the same kid, she doesn't like him very much, a sky hole.
I remember.
Which is, I had a dream about that word. Because I was like, my husband is really tall, and I was like, oh, he's really tall, so sky, and somehow, the word was not aimed toward him, but it was just, anyway.
Wasn't it though? Wasn't it?
No, he's a perfect angel.
So, yeah, any other questions? Any other swear words? Well, I think we are out of time, so thank you so much, everybody. We will be doing a signing.